It is an enormous pleasure to be back in Santiago. We were here last year. We did the story seminar, and now come back to do 4 days lecturing on the genres: horror, crime, thriller, comedy, and love story. So I have seen other Chilean films, but La Nana is now going to go into my repertoire for the big lecture, the story lecture, because it's a beautiful piece of minimalism and has a lovely arc from what we call an education plot, which takes a character from the negative, who has a character who has a negative point of view on life, and arcs them to a positive point of view, where they undergo an education. They learn to see life in a positive way. The education plot, where the character has a negative attitude, the protagonist has a negative attitude toward life, and over the story they learn to have a positive attitude. Films like About Schmidt, Lost in Translation, many of these are education plots, and so they're minimalist and they're interior, and it's a beautifully done arc. It's what we call the disillusionment plot, where you have the opposite arc. It starts out with a person who has a positive attitude toward life, and it turns to a negative attitude. For example, the film Capote. Okay, there's the maturation plot, which starts out with a character who's immature, and over the course of the story they become mature. The growing up story, with many of those. And there's the redemption plot, which is a story about somebody who is morally bad, negative at the beginning of the story, and redeems themselves and by taking on heroic action, some kind of action that redeems them as a moral human being. They go from immoral to moral. And then the fifth one is the degeneration plot that does the opposite. It starts with a person who is morally good, and over the course of the story, they degenerate into an immoral person. Those 5 genres are all about the inner life, changing your attitude toward life, changing your maturity, changing your morality. Those 5 genres are very powerful, but they are culturally specific, meaning how somebody goes about changing their attitude, how somebody goes about growing up, how somebody goes about changing their morality is very, very linked to the culture that they're in. Okay? So those 5 genres can be very moving stories in as long as the audience understands the context. There's a number of reasons. One is that modern life is deadening. Okay? Modern life tends to turn people into robots. You go to work, you eat your lunch, you go home, you watch television. Okay? Modern life is deadening. It is a great pleasure to go to a film that just makes you feel very sharp and strong emotions. I mean, it's one thing. One reason horror films are so successful is it's just what we call a roller coaster of extreme emotion, which breaks people out of the deadening life. The other reason people the people who feel the deadening effect of modern life most acutely are the young. When you get past a certain age, you're so used to the deadening effect of life, you don't notice it anymore. But the young can feel themselves being suffocated. I mean, imagine what it would be like to have been born in 1995. Okay? You're 15 years old now. Right? You have seen war, one after another. You have seen natural disasters from tsunamis and earthquakes. My God, you know, that you had here in Chile. You have seen tyranny. You have seen horror after horror after horror on television. You're born into a world that is absolutely insane. Politicians and people with power behaving in ways that are lunatic and destructive from one end of the planet to the other. And it's all on television. I mean, 100 years ago, people could ignore the madness because it wasn't right there in their living room. But now you're born into this crazy world. And so on one hand, the routine of life is deadening you. On the other hand, by implication, you could be robbed or raped at any moment. You could be kidnapped, whatever. The Andes Mountains could explode as volcanoes and destroy them. You know, and these fears are in the background of everybody, but especially the young. So they go to horror films in order to experience fear in a safe environment. The things they dread the most are projected in these films in an aesthetic way, in a cinema, so that you can experience the fear that's latent in you, but not have to suffer yourself the fate worse than